It's working again. Welcome back, everybody. What time is it? It's 35, so does that mean that we are streaming now? Great. In that case, I would love to introduce our next speaker, who might have a bit of a challenge, because with all the large language models coming out, and especially Microsoft Bing and Sydney and Venom, there's some large language models out there that tend to be, or pretend to be, quite charismatic, but they can turn evil quite easily. So the importance of charismatic AI, but done the proper way, that's what my next guest is going to talk about. Christoph Estlinger, sorry about that, from VUI Agency, our longtime sponsor and, of course, dear friend. Stage is all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Maike, for that wonderful introduction. And thanks for being here in so big numbers. It's a big room, but I like to look at a full, well-filled room. Now, you will see that I don't have much slides. Actually, I only have one slide, but I will only use it at the very end, because I'm a storyteller, and people in general like to tell stories, and they like to hear stories. From very early on, like even in ancient Greece, people would gather together and would enjoy hearing and telling good stories. Now let me start by telling you a story about a great customer service experience I had last year. And it's actually about an experience with a human being. So we're not going to start with the digital assistants quite yet. So I had lost my credit card. And, well, you all know that feeling. You look in your wallet and it's gone. Where is it? And you get worried, right? So, like, first thing you do, like, you pick up the phone and you call that customer service line. And fortunately, I got connected quite quickly, and the conversation started. Now, from the very first word of that conversation, I could hear that smile of the woman that was talking to me. Well, it's important. You can actually hear a smile. And that smile continued throughout the whole conversation. She made me feel good from the very start. And, well, the first thing she did is like, okay, well, let's look at if anything has happened to your bank account. And she told me the last transaction, and I said, yeah, that seems right. Okay. She said, okay, I've blocked your credit card, everything is fine. First worry done, right? And then the great thing about that conversation was that she continued in a very proactive way to take care of my worries, which at that point, like I was all over the place a little bit. They had not even materialized in my mind. So the next thing she said is, well, let me quickly check your current address. We'll send you a new card. Sure, done, finished. And she said, well, that was not the end of it. She said, let's continue. I'm sure you might worry about how do I change my credit card in my current online accounts, because I have online accounts that are being booked from that credit card. Let me help you with that. And she walked me through a process of setting up that card so that it would be used immediately in my online accounts without me having to wait for the physical card. All the while, as I said, I heard that smile, and she was really putting me in the center of her attention. We finished the call, and I walked away happy. Now, I don't only tell this story here in conferences. I tell this story to my friends. And I mentioned that this was actually with a bank that I use privately, N26. It's one of the German neobanks. Now, how much marketing budget did they spend on spreading this story? Not so much, right? People like to tell stories about extraordinary experiences. And by the way, people also like to tell stories about extraordinarily bad experiences. I would also have a story on that side, but today I like to stay on the positive side of things, right? But the second part of stories is what I call when you go into automation of customer service, you have to avoid one thing for sure, which is what I call frustration at scale. Because you create an experience that scales across a huge amount of customers. If you get it wrong, you have a story that spreads in the wrong direction. If you get it right, you have a story that spreads in the right direction. Now, why do companies do customer service? Right? Coming from the field of, as I said, customer service automation, I sometimes get the feeling that they do it because they have to. Right? When the first thing that we talk about is how much cost can I reduce, I get the feeling that, well, it's a nuisance. We somehow have to do it. Everybody else is doing it. Let's do it at the least possible amount of effort. Well, that should not be what customer service is about, right? Customer service is a privilege. Why do you do it? Because you do it for the people that pay your bills. They pay your bills. They make sure that you can employ your people. So, of course, it should be in your innate interest to create a great experience for them, not only on the product side, but also on the service side. And, okay. And when we, as a company that works with customers ourselves, right, usually we start projects by doing an evaluation of an existing chatbot or voicebot solution. And, well, we look at it, we give a first take on what we think about it. And then sometimes, of course, these companies are coming and saying, like, well, great points. Could you help us maybe redesigning that part? What do you think the first thing I say is? Well, let me put a price sticker on that one. Right? No, I don't do that. I say, of course, let's do it. We love working with you. Let's make that happen. And then afterwards, that's what I consider good customer service. Afterwards, of course, they come to us and they say, well, let's look at what we can do together, and I'm going to make sure I'm going to pay you a fair price because you're doing great work. Right? So when we think about customer service, let's really think about that it's a privilege to do so. And Charismatic AI is basically about creating these extraordinary experiences that people talk about. And it's about this joy in providing great customer service. I had a good conversation this morning with my friend and colleague Sarah, and she's originally from Spain, but she moved to Germany. And I asked her, can you tell me a recent extraordinary customer service experience that you had in the last year? And she said, no, I cannot. Because I avoid actually calling customer service in Germany because I'm afraid they don't speak my language. So English would be fine, right? Of course, it would be even greater if she could talk in her mother tongue, which is Spanish. Now, it's very hard, to find a human being that speaks all European languages fluently. It's not such a far stretch to do that with a digital assistant. So when we think about how we can use the power of technology, let's think about these things, right? It's a great experience. You call there, you can just speak in your mother tongue and you're being understood, right? Again, that's about great customer service. And when we think about creating special assistants, that's what we mean when we talk about charismatic AI. We don't do it just to to create an enjoyable experience per se, right? We also want to get people thinking about, well, can I sometimes make my product better so that I actually avoid certain questions, right? So that they don't even arise, because my product design is so well done that the questions don't even come up in the first place. Now, there's another short story I want to tell you. Last year, we were sponsoring an event it was actually on a castle close to Cologne. and the hotel was in the castle. So this was a very fancy hotel. And customer service in such hotels is a special experience. So, like the way these people at the reception and the concierge treats you, like it really makes you feel like, wow, all my needs are taken care of, right? And I had this one experience where I was like, in the morning, I was preparing for the next day. I was taking a shower. And as usual, same happened this morning, I was not checking before where is the hairdryer. So I'm stepping out of the shower, and I'm looking for the hairdryer in the bathroom. Naturally, I would look for the hairdryer in the bathroom, right? But there was no hairdryer to be found. So I went to the telephone, and I called. Again, the same thing happened. It was really a special experience to be treated by this concierge in helping me find that hairdryer. I really felt like I'm in Buckingham Palace, and he really makes sure I get that hairdryer. But the point is, right, this experience would not have been necessary if you place maybe if you don't find a place in the bathroom to place the hairdryer, you can just put a small sign somewhere prominently that says hairdryer is under the safe in this cupboard. Then you avoid that question. Now, for this specific case, I have the hypothesis that they're actually hiding the hairdryer on purpose so that you experience that special customer service. But in general, Charismatic AI is also about a holistic approach to design, right? So you're not only looking at designing customer service, you're also looking at designing the product such that in most cases, questions don't even arise, right? Now, what I want to invite you to do is to think about customer service in this fashion of it is a privilege to do it, I want to do it, and I want to do it in a special way. And this is why my team has formed this vision of Charismatic AI. So we said, well, there is a benefit to getting the job done, right? But I would not have told you that first story and told you, my credit card was lost, I called them, and somehow they solved it. Job done, right? But you don't spread that story. But you spread a story about really a special experience. And I think with all the technology that is at our disposal, we have the power to create these special experiences. Now, the first step to creating Charismatic AI is to understand the role model of human-to-human charisma. And I was always a firm believer in a good complementarity between human service and digital service, right? So also that's why I started with this example of a human being that created this great experience, because these are the role models we try to complement in a good way, right? And if you look at human-to-human charisma, there's really a really good book that I can recommend to everyone. It's by Olivia Fox-Cabane. It's called The Charisma Myth, right? And in my eyes, she has a very nice definition of charisma, which centers around three foundational pillars. One being an element of power, one being an element of presence, and one being an element of warmth or some kind of benevolence. And this last pillar is central to also my personal definition of charisma. Charisma means that you put the person in front of you at the center of your attention, right? So a charismatic speaker, today I cannot show that as well, but a charismatic speaker is first and foremost a good listener. So if we were in a one-to-one talk, I would try to actually listen to you and listen first and foremost, and then talk about things that might be relevant to what you are interested in. Right? And again, this is the, a vision that really makes sense to strive for when we build great customer service experiences. little story from that book, because it's also a nice story to remember, is there was a electoral race for Prime Minister of the UK in the beginning of the last century between Benjamin Disraeli and I think it was Wilson was the second guy's name. And they both went out with a journalist to have dinner and to discuss about the upcoming election. And this journalist came out of these both talks, and she was, of course, afterwards giving interviews herself how she felt about meeting these two men. What she said about Mr. Wilson was, after talking to Mr. Wilson, I was absolutely convinced he's the most brilliant man in the United Kingdom. After talking to Mr. Disraeli, I was absolutely convinced I am the most brilliant woman in the United Kingdom. Right? And basically understanding, understanding these core principles is the first step to creating charismatic experiences. And then you can basically really go into also measuring parameters that let you being perceived more or less charismatic. So there's a lot of research done, for example, which pitch height, which tone of voice sounds more or less charismatic. We are working ourselves on basically measuring, collecting a lot of user insights in also which kind of a beginning into a dialogue is perceived more or less, which ending of a dialogue is perceived more or less charismatic. And this is where I want to point to this last slide. We have now worked a lot of years on this topic, and we want to share it with the wider world, let's say. That's why we created this, what we call the Charismatic AI Academy. It's going to launch within the next few weeks, and it's about enabling internal teams about creating these experiences. Now, I want to make one thing clear. This academy is not going to be a certification machine. So we want to be honest, and we want to be honest about saying it's going to be a long journey to become an expert in creating these extraordinary experiences. But we are happy to go on that journey with you, but we're not going to give you a expert certificate after a few weeks course, right? Because we believe it's only fair also to the people that have, like Maike, for example, have years and years of experience. It takes time, Lisa, it takes time to become an expert. And I think we should be aware of that. And I'm very glad, Hilde, that you're also, again, here for this talk, because I talked about it yesterday a little bit already at dinner, but I want to applaud you for coming here and for listening to us and for talking to us, because I think, as a regulator, the EU Commission and the associated offices, they carry a huge responsibility. And I think you will do your job really well by exactly coming to us and listening to us. Listen to the creativity that is sparking. You will see it when you walk out there. All the things that people are doing with all of these technologies, and understanding the potential that we try to harvest, right? I was talking yesterday, by training, I'm an economist, and being in Edinburgh in Scotland, you always remember this most famous Scottish economist, Adam Smith, who was not mainly an economist, he was actually a philosopher. And he had a very, very strong belief in the ability of people. The ability of people to do their best, and in working together, in letting this creativity work together, create a good outcome. Right? And as I said, I want to applaud you for being here, because what you said before, the core of our free European Union is the element of freedom and dignity. And dignity also means believing that people are smart enough to make their own decisions and to allow them to make mistakes, right? Smith was living at this time of the Industrial Revolution, and I'm sure there were a lot of worries going around. What is going to happen when we introduce an automobile, right? It's going to have huge impacts on different industries, but Smith believed in the ability of people to create new kinds of jobs. I will finish with this. Because I want to repeat this point because I think it was a nice point from the dinner yesterday. So there's also another great book, and that's the last one I want to say. Another great book that I will recommend, it's called The Feeling Economy. Recent book, which basically says, in the Industrial Revolution, we moved away from manual work to thinking work. And now we're at the brisk of a new era, which I call the AI revolution, where more and more thinking tasks will be taken over by technology. And what this book argues is that we will move away from thinking work to work that relies much more on emotional intelligence. In the coming century, that's what our jobs are going to be about: empathy, understanding human beings. And if we move into such a future, then where we develop our own emotional intelligence, then some of the predictions of Adam Smith will actually become more true, namely that he had a very strong belief that people have a very good moral compass and would inherently take care of things like social responsibility. Now, I think in the thinking age, this was not yet so well achieved, but I believe in the feeling economy, this might much more be achieved. With this, thank you very much for your attention. We're looking forward to welcome you also at our booth upstairs, where we prepared a little thing which is called the Charismatron. Because as I said, the first step to thinking about charismatic AI is to understand personal charisma. We're going to give you a little test on personal charisma, and we get into discussions about how you might apply that in AI technologies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I don't know about you, but I feel so kind of, uplifted and empowered by this, and lost for words, to be honest. True human-centered design, that's what it's all about, right? And I was just thinking, if you talk to ChatGPT, it never gives me the feeling that I know a lot. It only gives me the feeling that it supposedly knows a lot. So I love that example of, hey, allowing us to feel the experts that we are, because we all are experts in being a human being. So with that, are there any questions from the room or online? Online, we don't have any questions, I see. No questions online? Come on. Any questions from the room? We have time for one. Yeah, go ahead, gentleman over there.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for your charisma. It's just an observation, but I'll turn it into a question. There's something about these new generative large language models that when you read the transcripts of them talking, particularly when they're talking about themselves, people have been trying to get the Bing chatbot to kind of talk about itself. They're really annoying, aren't they? The way they talk. Maybe I'm alone in thinking that, but they have kind of a tone of voice which I think can be simultaneously be quite condescending, but also come across as sort of, a bit like self-regarding, like almost self-obsessed. But that's because they're being asked. I'd just be interested to know, what you think needs to be done to make bots, to get over that kind of uncanny valley, make bots, they seem almost realistic, but there's just something weird about it to make them actually seem like, oh, okay, yeah, I can engage with this bot in a way that feels comfortable. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. I actually have a microphone. No, I have one actually. It's a very good point. So, I think if you also look into movies and so on, there is actually also robotic characters that can come across as quite charismatic, but they don't pretend to be anything else but a robot, right? The central point is exactly as you said, is about not making it about yourself, but making it about the other one, right? And I think this is exactly what what is needed to have basically, like a layer in between that takes care of that. So like use the immense power in terms of like, knowledge accumulation and things like that, although we have to be careful about that too. I had an interesting episode with ChatGPT where I was, I was trying out a few things about, this, Scotland, and she gave me a very convincing story about a very successful entrepreneur, Ada Smith, female entrepreneur. And then afterwards I was just checking, let's check who is that, nowhere to be found. And then I asked it, could you give me like a little biography of Ada Smith, and said, I'm so sorry, that was just for illustrational purposes. It's not really a historical figure, but of course, when you read the answer, you think like, oh, wow, I can talk about Ada Smith. No, somehow it must have been also a play maybe on Adam Smith, and she tried to make it, well, it was in the end, we have to be aware, large language models are just like, stochastic predictors, right? They are predicting the most probable next word, right? And if you want to, if you want to ask, or if you're in a conversation where you want to convince a certain, when you want to bring a certain argument home, they will basically do what is necessary to bring that argument home, right? That's the point. That's also why these companies, they spend quite some energy on getting around the most probable words. Because if you ask ChatGPT please complete the following sentence, if the model was not, was not post-processed, would be very clear what the word would be. The stochastic model is very clear on what that word will be. Very, very clear. No question about it. Schedule, exactly. What's the schedule? For sure, right? So it's a very good question. I think we need that layer in between. Use the powers, but then make it about human centricity, customer centricity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.